I hadn't seen my son in over a year when he called and said, "Mom, it wouldn't be right without you." So I flew to his wedding, heart full of hope and a sapphire brooch in my suitcase. I didn't know then that I wasn't just a guest. I was a ghost. And the real betrayal hadn't happened yet. It was still waiting, silent and sharp, just beneath the surface. I hadn't flown in over 10 years, but when Matt called and said, "Mom, we really want you at the wedding," I booked my ticket that very afternoon. I even splurged for early boarding and checked a suitcase, though everything I needed could have fit in a carry-on. I packed my navy dress, the one I wore to Paul's funeral, but not for sentimental reasons. It just fit well and made me feel sharp. I packed a pair of sensible heels, my silver locket with his picture inside, and the antique sapphire brooch that had belonged to his mother. It was supposed to be my gift to the bride. Something old, something meaningful, something that mattered. The flight to Chicago was bumpy, crowded. The man next to me didn't say a word the entire way, just scrolled through photos of yachts and parties on his phone. I kept my hands folded and thought about Matt as a little boy, his red tricycle, his night terrors, the way he used to call me Mama, with both arms wrapped around my leg. I hadn't seen him in over a year, not since Paul's headstone was set. We'd texted, a few short calls. His voice always tight, busy. But when he asked me to come to the wedding, said it wouldn't be right without me there, I believed him. I wanted to. No one met me at the airport. I waited by baggage claim for 20 minutes, watching happy clusters of family reunite. A little girl ran straight into her grandfather's arms, knocking off his Cubs cap. I stood there with my coat draped over one arm, trying not to look too expectant. When it became clear no one was coming, I called Matt. It rang twice, then voicemail. "Hey, sweetheart. I just landed. I'm at O'Hare. Gate C. Call me when you get a moment." I took a cab. The driver kept the radio on sports talk the whole way, and I didn't ask him to change it. My hotel was clean but impersonal. Beige everything. I unpacked slowly, lining my shoes up against the wall, hanging my dress so the wrinkles might fall out on their own. I checked my phone. Still nothing from Matt. The rehearsal dinner was held at some trendy downtown spot with exposed brick and Edison bulbs like spider webs. I arrived 5 minutes early. I always do. Sarah's mother gave me a tight, pursed-lip smile when I entered and handed me a name tag that simply said, Linda. No last name. No mother of the groom. Just Linda, like I was someone's plus one. Sarah spotted me by the bar and floated over in a pink chiffon dress, all teeth and perfume. "Oh, good. You made it," she said, without a hug. Then, turning to a circle of her friends, she added lightly, "Everyone, this is Linda. She used to be married to Matt's late father." The words hung in the air like the smell of bleach. I smiled reflexively, the way you do when someone steps on your foot and says it was an accident. I didn't correct her. I didn't say that Paul and I were married for 32 years, that he died 3 summers ago, that I raised Matt nearly on my own while Paul worked 60-hour weeks, that there had been no other wife, just me. Her friends nodded vaguely, one of them already reaching for another shrimp skewer. A man in a velvet blazer said, "Ah, nice to meet you." I became invisible immediately after that. A decorative plant in orthopedic shoes. Dinner was long. Lots of toasts. Sarah's father gave a speech that included 4 jokes about empty nesting and exactly 0 mentions of me. Matt barely made eye contact. He looked tired, or maybe just distracted. When I finally managed to pull him aside near the restroom, I whispered, "Honey, that was a bit odd," what Sarah said. He rubbed the back of his neck and said, "Mom, please, not tonight. It's her family. Don't make this about you." Then he smiled, that PR smile he picked up after business school, and walked off before I could say another word. Back at the hotel, I took off my shoes and sat on the bed in silence. I didn't cry. I don't do that easily anymore. But I did take the sapphire brooch out of its velvet box and place it back in my suitcase. If I was just someone who used to be married to Matt's dad, then I saw no reason to hand over family heirlooms. The next day was the wedding. I didn't know it yet, but things were about to get worse. Much worse. The ceremony was held at a vineyard an hour outside the city, all draped fabric and fairy lights strung between old oak trees. The kind of place that photographs better than it feels, especially when the wind is sharp and no one thinks to bring a space heater for the elderly guests. I rode the shuttle bus alone, seated next to a cousin of the bride's, who spent the entire drive scrolling through Instagram reels with her volume up. I kept my eyes on the landscape, pretending to care about cornfields and clouds, while inside, I felt like I'd shown up to the wrong movie, one I was supposed to star in once. We arrived just in time for group photos. I walked toward the cluster near the trellis, adjusting the scarf around my shoulders, when a photographer, young, bearded, too confident, put a hand up. "Sorry, ma'am. Family only right now." I blinked. "I am family." He looked down at his clipboard. "Name?" "Linda Harrison, mother of the groom." His brows lifted slightly. "Oh, no one mentioned. Okay, we'll do a few quick shots with you later, all right?" I stepped back, nodded. What else could I do? I watched them pose. Matt between Sarah and her parents, her sister on one side, his father's second wife on the other. My replacement, in every sense but legal. She wore pearl earrings I recognized. I had given them to Paul on our 25th anniversary. I wondered if she knew. During the ceremony, I was seated 2 rows from the back, behind a decorative hedge that blocked half the view. The programs listed Sarah's parents by name, Matt's father and his wife, Elaine. My name wasn't listed. Not even once. I held the little folded program in my lap, and at some point realized I'd been crumpling the corner so tightly it tore. I let it fall beneath the seat. When the officiant spoke about the people who raised these two into the extraordinary humans they are today, I felt something twist in my chest. Sarah's mom wept softly. Elaine dabbed the corner of her eyes like a woman cast to play supportive stepmother number 2. I didn't cry. Again, I've trained myself not to. After the ceremony, while people milled about sipping champagne from coupes and complimenting the band, I found a folding chair near the buffet tent and sat, mostly ignored. Someone brought out oysters. Someone else took a selfie with the flower girl. I texted Matt, "Beautiful ceremony. Thank you for inviting me." No reply. When dinner was announced, I wandered toward the main tent and found a seating chart clipped to a gilded mirror. My name wasn't among the immediate family table. I was listed at table 12, between a couple from Delaware and Sarah's former college roommate. When I sat down, the woman next to me asked if I was with the venue. I smiled and said, "No, just with the boy who's getting married." From across the tent, I saw Matt raise his glass. He looked right past me. Toasts began. Sarah's father again, her mother. Even Elaine stood to speak. "It's not easy stepping into someone else's life," she said, "but I've always believed family is what you make of it." A soft chuckle from the crowd. Matt nodded. I could barely swallow the bite of chicken on my plate. I didn't finish the meal. I slipped away before the cake was cut, before the first dance. I didn't say goodbye. I wasn't sure anyone would notice. Back in the hotel room, I opened my phone, hoping, just maybe, Matt had texted. There was a notification. A message from him, hours old. "Hope you had a good time tonight, Mom. Don't wait up. Early flight tomorrow." I read it 3 times. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a polite dismissal. On the bed was a small wicker basket wrapped in cellophane. A thank you gift from the couple. Inside, a lavender-scented candle, a bottle of sparkling water, and a note card. "Thank you for coming. Your presence meant the world. M&S." There was no mention of my name. Not even a "Love, Matt." I lit the candle out of spite. It smelled like sugar and dish soap. I thought that would be the end of it, that I'd pack in the morning, fly home, and forget the way my son had made me feel like a ghost at his own wedding. But the next morning, I checked my bank account. And that's when I realized the wedding had been just the surface. The real betrayal was waiting beneath. I didn't panic at first. I just stared at the number on the screen, like it might fix itself if I looked long enough. The balance wasn't zero, not quite, but it was far less than it should have been. I scrolled through the transactions. There it was, 4 days ago. A transfer of $22,000 from the joint account I'd opened years ago for Matt's future, long before he could legally access it. The account I hadn't thought about in months. The one I always told myself was for his emergencies. For something important. Apparently, a honeymoon counted. I refreshed the app twice, thinking maybe I'd tapped the wrong account. But there it was. Cleared, finalized, and marked as initiated by secondary account holder. Matthew. My son. My only son. The thing about being betrayed is that your body feels it first. My jaw ached from clenching. My neck burned hot. I sat on the edge of the bed, fingers still wrapped around my phone, and tried to breathe. The window was open an inch, letting in that late October chill. It smelled like exhaust and overwatered mums. I called the bank. The woman on the line sounded young, chipper in that overly rehearsed way. I explained the situation, calmly at first, then firmer when she tried to redirect me to the online FAQ. Ma'am, since the account was joint and both parties had full access, the withdrawal is legally valid, she said. We understand this might be upsetting, but... Upsetting, I said, then caught myself. No sense yelling at someone who couldn't help. Can you at least tell me if there's been any other activity? She paused. Looks like he added a new card last week, ending in 8823. Is that yours? Number no. It was not. I hung up. I didn't even bother texting Matt. What would he say? That I was overreacting? That it was just money? I could hear his voice already, dismissive and rehearsed, just like his father used to sound when he didn't want to be challenged. I stared at the brooch, still in its box. I hadn't given it to Sarah. Somehow, I'd known. A flicker of something in her eyes, maybe. Or just the way she never once looked me straight on unless other people were watching. The brooch had belonged to Paul's mother, Margaret Harrison, a woman of impossible standards, but who'd once told me, whatever you give your child, they'll forget. What you withhold, that they'll remember forever. I hadn't understood it then. I did now. I called Matt. Voicemail. Of course. A few hours later, he texted, Hey Mom, got your message. Didn't mean to startle you. Sarah and I used some of the funds for the trip. We assumed it was okay. You always said it was for us. Not for you. Not thank you. Just a bland justification. I replied, That money was for your future, not a 5-star spa in Tulum. He didn't answer. By the afternoon, I'd had enough. I asked the front desk to hail me a cab and rode to a cafe near their apartment. I knew better than to go straight to their door. This needed to happen in public. Matt met me at the cafe. He showed up 20 minutes late, hair still damp, smelling like expensive shaving balm. No ring. Hey, Mom, he said, sliding into the booth across from me like this was brunch and not a confrontation. Want anything? Coffee? I'm fine. My voice came out tighter than I'd meant. We need to talk about the account. He exhaled like I'd asked him to shovel snow. Look, I didn't think it was a big deal. You've always been generous, and Sarah thought it made sense. Sarah? I interrupted. Sarah thought it made sense to empty my savings? His jaw tensed, then relaxed in that way people do when they've prepared for this. We're family, Mom. It's all one pot, isn't it? No, I said, flat. It isn't. He smiled then. Not kindly, not warmly. That small corporate smile he used when he closed a deal. Mom, you're still in good shape. You've got the house, your retirement. We just used what was there. You said you'd support us. I didn't give you permission, I said. That matters. Legally and morally. He shrugged. Technically, I didn't need it. And there it was. The truth, uncloaked. I stood, suddenly cold. I came here because you said you wanted me at your wedding. You didn't say you planned to rewrite the meaning of family while you were at it. Matt didn't argue. He just looked down at his phone, already half gone. Back at the hotel, I locked the brooch in the small safe. I pulled out a manila folder I'd brought almost as an afterthought, the one with my original will, the trust documents, the letters Paul had written before he passed. It was time to look through them again. Time to check what else I had forgotten to protect. Because that's what I finally understood. What happened at the wedding wasn't the betrayal. That was just the invitation. The real betrayal had already let itself in, taken off its coat, and made itself at home. The lawyer's office still had the same musty carpet I remembered from years ago, though the receptionist was new. Young, chipper, with a glossy ponytail and acrylic nails that clicked against the keyboard. I sat on the beige couch, clutching the folder like it was a life raft. The pages inside still smelled faintly of Paul's tobacco. He used to roll his own, even when I begged him to stop. He'd signed most of the documents in his careful, looping hand, right there in this office, in that final spring before his diagnosis. When my name was finally called, I stood slowly, my knees still stiff from yesterday's flight and the hours I'd spent pacing the hotel room. The attorney, Mr. Goldstein, had aged, of course. His hair was mostly gone now, and his glasses thicker, but he remembered me. Linda, he said, rising from behind a desk cluttered with legal pads and coffee-stained manila folders. How long has it been? 8 years? 10, I said. Paul died 3 years after we updated the will. He nodded somberly and gestured for me to sit. So, what brings you in? I told him everything. The wedding, the bank account, the brooch that stayed in its box. His face didn't change much, just a faint tightening around the mouth. He listened the way good lawyers do, hands steepled, eyes never blinking too long. When I finished, I slid the folder across the desk. I want to know if the will's still valid, if it protects me. He flipped through the documents, stopping at the copy of our trust. Then he paused. This isn't the latest version, he said slowly. My stomach dropped. What? He turned to his computer, tapped a few keys. Let me check our system. Yes, here it is. Looks like there was a revision filed 2 years ago. Signed by you. Notarized in Oregon. Do you remember that? I shook my head. I've never updated anything since Paul passed. Goldstein pulled the document up on his screen and spun it gently toward me. I stared at my own signature. Crooked, slanted, identical in all the wrong ways. It had been copied from the original. Someone had forged my name. The new version left everything to Matt. The house, the investments, even the pension disbursements. Gone were the clauses about donations to the hospice Paul died in. Gone the provision for my bridge club friend, who used to bring me groceries when I threw out my back. It's fraud, I whispered. Mr. Goldstein nodded once. It is, but we'll need proof. Handwriting analysis, a formal report. It'll take time. And money. I have both, I said. At least for now. He gave a small, approving grunt. I'll start the paperwork. In the meantime, do not speak to your son about this. If he knows you're aware, it could complicate things. As I left, the receptionist handed me a card with a local handwriting expert's contact information. She's good, she said. Helped one of our clients keep her lake cabin from her nephew last year. I thanked her. She didn't look up from her phone. Outside, the wind cut sharper than before. I pulled my coat tight, thinking about the last Thanksgiving we'd spent as a family. Matt had arrived late, Sarah had forgotten the cranberry sauce, and we'd laughed at how nothing ever went according to plan. That was the last time he'd hugged me without obligation. Back at the hotel, I called my neighbor in Vancouver, Trisha. She's the kind of woman who knows what every squirrel in the neighborhood is up to. When she answered, breathless, I asked if anyone had stopped by my house. "Oh, yes," she said quickly. "Couple came last week. Young, dressed real nice. Said they were interested in buying the property. Said they'd been told it might be on the market soon. I told them that was news to me." I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. "Did they leave a card?" "Nope. Just smiles and clipboards. I figured maybe you were downsizing." "No," I said, throat dry. "No, Trisha. I'm not." We hung up. I looked at my phone, at the string of unanswered texts from Matt, the thank you note still saved in my photos like a taunt. My fingers moved almost without thinking, opening the browser, typing in Elder Financial Abuse Legal Resources, Illinois. The links came up fast. Too many of them. I read through 3 of them before I found one that stuck. A hotline, run through a nonprofit. I called. A kind voice answered. She asked me questions I'd never imagined answering. Have you given anyone power of attorney? Has anyone isolated you from other relatives? Do you feel unsafe? I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. After I hung up, I placed the brooch back into the safe. Then I sat down and wrote a list. Lawyer, handwriting analyst, bank contact, will revision, house deed. At the bottom, I wrote one more name. Rachel Lee, a friend of my late niece, a sharp young lawyer in Chicago, who once told me at a barbecue she liked cases that made people squirm. It was time to make someone squirm, maybe even a few someones. Rachel Lee didn't ask unnecessary questions. That was the first thing I liked about her. She met me in a no-frills office above a laundromat in Wicker Park. Cement floors, mismatched chairs, an espresso machine humming like it was too tired to protest. She wore a blazer too large for her and no makeup, just clear eyes and a clipped voice that didn't waste syllables. "Let me guess," she said, scanning the file I slid across the table. "Your son thinks it's not theft if it's family." "I raised him better," I said. Rachel gave a small smile. "That's what they all say." In less than an hour, she'd mapped out our first line of attack. A cease and desist to Matt and Sarah regarding any further financial activity on joint accounts, a formal report to the local elder abuse unit, and a motion to freeze all assets connected to the forged will. She also asked for a copy of the house deed. "I checked the property database last night," I said, handing her the printed page. "It's still under my name, but I want to make sure it stays that way." She nodded. "Smart. Predatory transfers happen quietly. We'll put a fraud alert through the county clerk's office today. And I'll need access to the original will your husband signed. Do you still have it?" I pointed to the folder. "I have everything." And I did. I had the signed trust, the old photos, the notarized forms, even the post-it Paul had stuck on the cover the day we walked out of Mr. Goldstein's office. "For the future," it said. I'd left it there, faded and curled. Rachel moved fast. By noon, the freeze was in place. By 3, she'd filed a petition contesting the amended will, and just before 5, she handed me a letter to sign, revoking any and all power of attorney that may have been fraudulently initiated. "Do you want them notified formally, or just let them find out when the money stops moving?" she asked, deadpan. I signed without hesitation. Let them find out the way I did. By looking too late. Back at the hotel, I was pouring tea from a little ceramic pot when my phone rang. Sarah, her name glowing on the screen like a siren. I let it go to voicemail. Not 10 minutes later, a new message came through. "Hi, Linda. So, we noticed something strange at the bank today. Matt can't access the joint funds anymore, and the financial planner says there's a freeze on the accounts. This is all just a big misunderstanding, I'm sure. Can we talk? You've always been generous. Let's not ruin a good thing over confusion." A good thing. I didn't reply. That evening, I met Rachel at the courthouse to file the fraud complaint in person. On our way out, she stopped me near the stairs. If they fight back, and they might, it'll get ugly. You okay with that? I lived through Paul's cancer, I said. I lived through childbirth without an epidural. I lived through watching my son erase me table by table at his wedding. So yes, I'm okay with ugly. The next day, Matt sent an email through his attorney. Short. Cold. My mother's actions are retaliatory and harmful to our family's well-being. We request that she cease further legal threats and consider mediation before escalating matters further. I forwarded it to Rachel without a word. By Friday, the calls started. First from mutual friends, then from my old neighbor in Vancouver. Did you really hire a lawyer? Matt says you're trying to destroy his life. Sarah's so upset, she hasn't slept in days. They were circling their wagons, playing the sympathy card, but I didn't flinch. That weekend, I pulled down every box I'd stored in the guest closet. Paul's letters, Matt's school awards, the photo albums I hadn't opened since before Sarah arrived in our lives. I made coffee, opened each one, and began labeling what I would keep and what could go. Because this wasn't just about the money anymore. It wasn't even about the brooch, or the wedding, or the shame of being spoken about in past tense while still breathing. It was about dignity, about the space I occupied, the air I still had every right to breathe, and I was done asking permission to exist in it. That night, Rachel called. We got the first confirmation. The signature on the new will? Doesn't match. Forensic experts willing to testify. I leaned back in my chair. The hotel room smelled like overbleached towels and something faintly citrus. Outside, the skyline blinked like it knew something was coming. Good, I said. Let them see what happens when you push a woman too far. Let them learn the hard way. The courthouse was quieter than I expected. No shouting lawyers, no banging gavels, no dramatic objections. Just the low hum of fluorescent lights, the soft scuff of shoes against tile, and a judge who looked like she'd seen every shade of betrayal 50 times over. I sat with Rachel at the claimant's table, my back straight, despite the dull ache in my spine that had become a near-constant companion. Matt didn't look at me when he entered the room. He wore a navy suit that hung too loose on his shoulders, like he'd shrunk since the wedding. Beside him sat his attorney, slick, overconfident, already shuffling papers like he knew exactly how this would go. Sarah wasn't there. I hadn't expected her to be. She rarely showed up unless there was applause to be earned. The hearing itself was short. Rachel laid everything out with that dry precision I'd come to admire. The forged will, the fraudulent bank activity, the unauthorized access to joint accounts, the attempt to sell my home behind my back. She passed the judge a copy of the forensic report, a signed affidavit from the bank's fraud department, and 2 letters from neighbors who'd witnessed strangers snooping around my property. Matt's lawyer argued it was all a misunderstanding, that I'd been confused, that I'd given permission, verbally. The judge raised one eyebrow and asked for documentation. There was none. When the freeze was upheld and a formal investigation ordered, Matt finally looked at me. Not with rage, not with remorse, just defeat. Like a child who had finally realized the toy he broke wasn't fixable. Afterward, I didn't approach him. I walked out of that courtroom with Rachel at my side and didn't look back. The next few weeks moved quickly. The house in Vancouver remained mine. The forged will was nullified. My accounts were secured, passwords changed, joint access revoked. Rachel helped me create a new estate plan, this time with a protected trust, and no room for misinterpretation. Matt's name was nowhere in it. Instead, I added a scholarship fund in Paul's name, for students over 50 going back to school. I gave a small monthly grant to the hospice nurse who sat with me the night Paul passed. And I left the rest to a local literacy program, one that taught women how to read after years of being told they didn't matter. I sold the house. The day it closed, I stood in the empty living room and ran my hand over the wall where we'd once marked Matt's height in pencil. I took a photo of it. Then I painted over it myself. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity. 3 weeks later, I moved to Tucson, Arizona. The heat soothed my joints. The sun felt like something I hadn't earned but gratefully received. I bought a small adobe-style home with a shaded patio and a fig tree in the yard. I joined a local book club, started volunteering at the public library on Mondays and Thursdays. I made friends, real ones. Sometimes people asked me if I had children. Yes, I'd say, and then smile just enough to end the conversation. Matt didn't reach out. Not once. He didn't call on Thanksgiving, didn't send a card at Christmas. I heard from a friend that Sarah had posted a photo of their family holiday on social media. Matching pajamas, a dog in a sweater, mugs of cocoa. I didn't feel envy. I didn't feel rage. I felt nothing. One night, I sat on my patio with a cup of tea and the brooch in my hand. I'd kept it. Not because it was valuable, because it had survived. Just like I had. The stars over Arizona are different. Bigger, somehow. Closer. I leaned back in my chair and let the air settle around me. Quiet, steady, mine. Paul once said I was the strongest person he knew. I hadn't believed him then, but I did now.